In April of 1994, Bruce Babbitt and Michael Espy, who were Interior and Agricultural Secretaries, approved a law that wolves would be reintroduced into Yellowstone National Park and central Idaho via transportation from Canada after their area-based extinction in the 1920s. The gray wolf reintroduction in Yellowstone breaks boundaries not only in the fact that it is one of the most extensive public effort in natural environmental issues, but also because it is one of our only reintroductions that accepts trophic cascades, the theory that predators are as important as their prey in their ecosystems in the United States. This is environmental boundary breaking, the gray wolf reintroduction to Yellowstone. Our story begins in the 1920s. Wolves are hunted all over the country for numerous reasons, including livestock protection, self-defense, and doing it just for fun. At this point in time, very little is understood of the balance a predatory animal brings to an environment. Everyone shoots and traps and poisons the wolves, including the park rangers themselves. Soon, the last Yellowstone wolf has been killed. Right away, scientists noticed that the amount of elk skyrocketed without their primary predator to keep their numbers in check. The coyotes' numbers also jumped as well. Without their main competition, they were very successful. Sadly, a few animals' sudden success led to a dozen others' downfalls. One example of this is the beaver. The beaver uses willow branches profusely for both food and for their dams and lodges. This is also the perfect food for the elk, who now consume much more of it with their heightened numbers. The beavers were not the only ones to suffer. The fox, black bear, brown bear, raven, wild rodent, and songbird population was lowered, just to name a few. The songbirds could not eat the berries from the bushes if the much larger and more dangerous elk could get to them first. And the wild rodents, barely considered a snack to most wolves, would be a main target to a coyote, which is now unrivaled and high in numbers. Even the mighty brown bear was facing problems. With less wolves comes less leftover kills that a large animal such as a bear may rely on if they could not make a kill themselves. This idea that wolves did nothing to help an environment stayed mostly in the minds of many, and as of the year 1960, the wolf has been restricted only to the western UP of Michigan and northeastern Minnesota, as seen on this map. Finally, in the year 1966, the first ever list of species that were in need of help appeared. This was including the gray wolf. This was called the Endangered Species Preservation Act of 1966, which would eventually turn into the Endangered Species Act of 1973. This act would feature not only animals from the USA, but also animals on an international level. This act helped the gray wolf and its rapidly decreasing numbers, as it prohibited unregulated hunting on the animals. Sadly, their numbers were not yet restored to their previous amounts, and Yellowstone still suffered from the absence of the wolf. Nothing seemed to be done about it until 1991. An EIS, also known as an Environmental Impact Statement, is used to convince the government to support their idea of how necessary it is to do something, including the natural environment. This EIS is incredibly important to our topic in specific, as it is describing how we should reintroduce wolves into Yellowstone and its nearby areas. The EIS was accepted to be reviewed in May of 1994, and that is when Bruce Babbitt and Michael Espy approved the law so that wolves would be pulled from the Yellowstone-like area in Canada and be moved to the national park itself in January of 1995 and 1996. So this finally brings us to the introduction itself. The time is January of 1995. The place is Jasper National Park from Alberta. It was chosen for its similarity to Yellowstone National Park itself, which would be very useful as 14 wolves from this area would be moved to Yellowstone. The wolves were moved to acclimation pens so that they could get used to their new habitat before being let loose inside of it. The very few other wolf reintroductions before this one had proven that wolves that were held in captivity for longer strayed less from the area and instead accepted their new surroundings. The pens from 1995 and mostly from 1996 appeared in the northern parts of the park, an area with around 15,000 elk. The 1995 and 1996 wolves were released between March 21st and the 27th and April 2nd and the 14th. For both years, they were held in pens for 3 months. Observational numbers went much better than scientists expected, with only 256 sheep and 91 cattle being killed by the wolves from 1995 to 2003. As well as this, 9 wolves were born in 1995 and 14 were born in 1996. The death numbers were less than expected, but still saddening, with a total of 11 wolf deaths in both years. 4 out of 11 of these deaths were human-related. There was also some animal interactions involving the wolves as well, such as one including a grizzly bear. At one point, a grizzly came within just 600 feet of a wolf den, but was chased off by the alpha female and 2 younger wolves. There was also a minor wolf conflict, where a young wolf from the pack titled Chief Joseph had been attacked by the alpha male from the Leopold pack. The young wolf got away relatively unharmed. The prey of the gray wolf was somewhat interesting as well. Obviously, they had eaten some livestock and rabbits along with a very few bison, but these numbers pale in the amount of deer and elk that the wolves had hunted. Which brings us to what happened after the wolves came back to Yellowstone. Almost immediately from when the wolves were let loose into the park, the deer species numbers plummeted. Right away, that might not sound like a positive, but it definitely is. Remember, the elk and deer have had numbers way higher than they should have been for more than 70 years. This was very good because due to the wolves killing, life came back to Yellowstone. Take the fox for example. Its numbers were falling rapidly because of the coyotes' unrivaled hold on the park. Then, the wolf came back. They killed some coyotes, and so the fox could grow back to its previous numbers. Also due to the sudden absence of deer and elk, the bushes were now much less crowded, allowing songbirds and black bears to eat more berries, as well as allowing beavers to get their precious willow trees back. As well as this, tree sizes within forests were said to quintupled, and many other plants grew back to a pre-1920s size. But that was not even the craziest consequence of the reintroduction, because the wolves changed rivers. This effect was due to the changed habit of the elk. The elk are now more often on the move, fearing that the wolves may be tracking them. This leads to stronger plants and plant roots, as previously discussed, which makes the riverbanks harder to erode. Sadly, not everyone agrees with the wolf reintroduction. Some believe it is instead ruining the habitat of Yellowstone and the areas of Idaho that it was also reintroduced in. Others fear their livestock may be at stake, even though the numbers killed by wolves came in less than expected. Some even fear for their own safety, such as Lenore Barrett, the Idaho state legislator.
In Alaska, when they send their children to school, they walk them to the bus and they go armed. Do I have to live like that in Idaho? Shouldn't have to, but just so somebody from out of state or back east or somebody that sits in an office all week and thinks wolves are cute and cuddly and how pretty. No, this is Idaho. They don't have any right to visit those kinds of things onto my state.
Despite Bray's concerns, there has been no documented kills upon humans from wolves in the continental United States since at least the year 1900. Although some may argue against the legitimacy of the project, many still agree that the gray wolf reintroduction was the best environmental project of our time. This was very easily shown by the outcomes within Yellowstone, a park made much more diverse due to the boundaries broken by the environmentalists and wolves who saved that sacred ecosystem and enlightened us on the theory of trophic cascades.